This is the Tech Phantom, and welcome to the next video in the series where we journey towards the new downloadable content for Dark Souls for the PS3. And we are going to upgrade the Great Scythe to +5 so that we have a little bit of offensive power, actually quite a bit of offensive power. A +5 Great Scythe is going to do 150 physical damage, and with the scaling we are going to be up at about 179 physical damage, which is more than enough for the earlier parts of the game. And the reason we've decided to do this, to upgrade the weapon or reinforce the weapon, is based on Andre's recommendation, and also based on the fact that as a sorcerer build we really don't have a lot of vitality or a lot of endurance, so we really can't tank much damage. So we need some good offensive output, and I really don't like range attacks, magic or bows, so that leaves me with the Great Scythe. So that's why I've upgraded it to a +5. Okay, and we are also going to define the last rule, the fourth rule of the walkthrough. And that the fourth rule is that whenever we see a rat, we must kill it. As a matter of fact, I know that I've killed this rat, but I want to make sure that it's dead. So we're going to hack at it a couple of times. Die! Die, you rat! So not only are rats unhealthy and ugly, but they also drop humanity. And if, as you guys might have been able to tell from the previous videos, I like to pick up humanity whenever I can, and I make that a priority in all of my builds. Now I don't know why I do that, because the game does give you plenty of humanity, but I just like to always have some humanity on hand. Okay, so here's a little tip for you guys. If you're having problems making that jump, the trick is to jump just to the left of the corner. If you try to jump right on the corner, you will hit the wall, the mural, and you will not be able to make it to this area here. But if you jump just to the left of the corner, as you saw me do a few seconds ago, you will be able to make that jump. So there is an alternate method to get that humanity if you can't make that jump, and that is to break the barrels, drop down here. And we're coming up to another one of what I like to call secret or obscure treasure, and that is through this hidden doorway here. And it's only hidden because of where the game puts the camera, and it doesn't make it visible to you when you drop into this area unless you swing the camera around. And there is some treasure over there, so we have just picked up some garbage, some rubbish. So you can actually trade this rubbish with Sparkly for a Titanite chunk. So, alright, so as you can see, this is the alternate way to that humanity. We're back there, so we've jumped off. And we continue on our merry way towards the next bonfire. And we're not going to talk about lore for a little bit. We will talk about lore after we get through the bonfire, but I do have some interesting tidbits for you, some interesting speculation as it relates to a couple of NPCs. One that we're going to meet in this video, actually a couple that we're going to meet in this video, and one that we're going to meet much later in the game in another video. Alright, so you see me trying to make this jump. I don't know if it's possible to make that jump. If it is, let me know. I've never been able to make it, so we need to find another way to get to that area. That there is an important item, or an item that I want to highlight to you guys. So we are going to visit a merchant. He is the undead male merchant, and we are slowly hacking our way through him. So we need to get through some of these enemies. And the undead male merchant is right there through that doorway, and I'm just checking to make sure that there's nobody behind me. So let's listen to his dialogue. He does have a very annoying laugh, and he ends all his dialogue with that which to me is one of the most annoying things ever. This is an important merchant because he sells the bottomless box, and if you guys remember, item management is one of our cardinal rules. As a matter of fact, is rule number 2, so that is going to be a useful item for us. And he also warns us about a goat demon, a bull demon, and a humongous drake. And he has an Uchigatana in his lap, and you can't see it from this angle, but he strokes and he obsesses over an Uchigatana. And he actually calls this Uchigatana Yulia. So he's not talking about his girlfriend or his mom or his wife. Yulia is the name that he's given his Uchigatana. And I'm trying to coax some additional dialogue from him, and let's see, maybe if we bought a throwing knife, which is only 10 souls, maybe he will give us a little bit more dialogue. But no, he's all business, and he says, hey, if you're not going to buy anything from me, we got nothing to talk about. So guess what, dude? If you're not going to give me any additional information that I could use for the lore, and you're going to end up laughing at me with your dialogue, you're going to die. So actually the reason why we're killing the undead male merchant is because he drops very, very good loot. He drops the residence key, he drops some humanity, and he drops the Uchigatana. And the Uchigatana is one of the best weapons in the game. As a matter of fact, if you're following along, or if you're thinking of following along, and if you want a weapon that doesn't require you to go to the catacombs, use the Uchigatana. It has exactly the same requirements as the Great Scythe, 14 dex and 14 strength. And it's actually a faster weapon. It's not as powerful, but it is faster. And it also has a bleed component to it, just like the Great Scythe. And it is a heck of a weapon, and you can certainly follow along using the Uchigatana instead of the Great Scythe. Okay, so we've climbed up to the roof, and we found the alternate route that's going to allow us to get to that area that we couldn't climb up to before. And the reason I wanted to come up here is because if you're doing level 1 builds, so if you're using a pyromancer and you're not going to level up for the entire game, the light crossbow is one of the few weapons that a level 1 pyromancer can wield, and I think it's the only projectile weapon. And after it's been leveled up, it's a much stronger and much better projectile weapon than, for example, using Soul Arrow, which a level 1 pyromancer can do as well. And as a matter of fact, if you are doing a level 1 build, do not kill the undead male merchant. That is the most important merchant for level 1 builds, because he sells weapons that a level 1 pyromancer can use. And there's really not a lot of them, guys. So if you are trying for a level 1 build, do not kill the undead male merchant, even if it laughs in your face. Okay, so we are going to continue here on our way, and I'm going to do something which is a little bit different for how most walkthroughs normally go, and that is that I am going to unlock both shortcuts that are available in the Lower Undead Burg. And so, just warning you, this is going to be a relatively long video, and it's going to look like we're not going to accomplish much, but we're actually going to be unlocking a couple of pretty important shortcuts. Alright, so we've made it to this treasure chest that has black fire bombs, and those are going to come in handy in a little bit. And we continue going through here, and if you remember on a previous video, the Crestfallen Warrior told us that Lordran is a land that is just full of undead, chock full of the undead. And you know what? He is absolutely right. I mean, there are undead absolutely everywhere. There's undead merchants, there's undead soldiers, there's demons that are guarding this place. So this may be a little bit tough for beginners because you have a lot of enemies to get through, and you need to basically figure out the mechanics and the gameplay style that works for you in order to advance, to make sure that you're not dying and having to go back to the bonfire and fight the same enemies over and over again. Alright, so we've just picked up some gold pine resin, which can be used to temporarily enchant your weapon with lightning damage. And it's very useful against dragons and drakes. And you also saw me switch my shield to the spider shield, and that is because we're going to be taking on our first relatively tough enemy in the game, and that is a Black Knight. But before we do that, let me tell you about a little trick for this barrel. You can jump over that barrel that's hurled down by that soldier, or as you saw me do, what I like to do instead is I like to stand just to the right there where the stairs are crumbled, and the barrel will roll right past you. So that was a little bit of a tip for you guys if you're impatient and you don't want to wait for the barrel to come down. You can just wait halfway up the stairs and it'll miss you. Alright, so I've equipped the Hornet Ring, and I've also added the Stone Helm, so I have a little bit more defense, and obviously the Hornet Ring so that I have a little bit higher critical damage. And that is because I am going to try to backstab that Black Knight. And wearing light armor, I'm not going to make a lot of noise, so I'm able to sneak up right behind him and whack. I take off about half his life. And then I like to come to an open area where I have a little bit more room, and I can circle the Black Knight and I can do a backstab. And again, because I'm wearing the Hornet Ring. And if you want, you can parry him. His attacks are pretty fast, so you need to be pretty fast in the trigger. So he drops the Titanite chunk, and he also drops the Black Knight sword, which is an excellent weapon. And let's take a look at the description. It says that it's used to face chaos demons, used by the Black Knights who wander Lordran, and that the large motion puts the weight of the weapon into the foes who were of very, very large size. So there's a lot of information there. So one of the first tidbits that you may not know about is that in the original concept for the game, the Black Knights were supposed to be in random locations throughout Lordran. They were supposed to be wandering Lordran. So that's what that piece of description is referring to. In the final concept of the game, they're in specific locations, and they're normally guarding some loot or some area. But originally, they could have been anywhere in the game. You could have just encountered them anywhere. And then the other piece of information is that their weapons are big and heavy because they needed to fight some very, very large foes. And that's because the Black Knights belonged to Lord Wynn, and Lord Wynn used them to fight the demons, who long ago were annihilated by Lord Wynn and Seath the Scaleless. Alright, so the Master Key allows us to get down to this tower and to meet an NPC. Actually, not meet him, confront him is more like it. And he attacks us right away, so he's hollowed. If he was not hollowed, he would probably talk to us. And this is Havel the Rock. And I will have more to say about Havel the Rock, but I do want to talk about a theory that I have that differs a little bit to what the community, the consensus in the community is about Havel the Rock. So Havel the Rock was imprisoned by Wynn, and he rebelled against Wynn, and that's why he was in prison. At least that is the consensus of the community. I have a slightly different interpretation, and when we get to Honor Londo, and when we end up meeting another NPC, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but my interpretation is that Lord Wynn used another NPC to pass an ultimatum onto Havel the Rock. And when this NPC confronted Havel the Rock, Havel refused them, fought him. He was killed by this other NPC. He then became undead. The NPC locked him in the tower. And then after hundreds of years, he slowly turned hollow. And we finally find him. And he attacks us right away. And he has Havel's ring, which is one of the most useful rings in the game. And if you notice, the way out to the tower is the Darkroot Basin. And like I said, I will tie up the theory when we meet the NPC later on in the game. But anyway, my theory is that Havel was not imprisoned directly by Lord Wind. He may have been imprisoned under his orders, but that it was actually another NPC that imprisoned him. And I have a pretty wild story or theory that wraps up the other NPC along with some other characters and enemies that we are going to meet in Darkroot Garden and in an area later on in the downloadable content. Alright guys, so here's a funny or kind of embarrassing thing. This is how not to kill a crystal lizard. As you see me do here, that crystal lizard is like 90% dead, 99% dead, and I miss it. So I'm going to have to come back here. I'll probably do it offline and try to, or I won't tape it, but I'll try to get that Twinkling Titanite and see if I get a chunk or anything else. Yeah, hopefully you guys aren't laughing too hard when you see that I missed the first crystal lizard in the game. Okay, so we are we are going forward, and we've just passed the fog door, and we've gone up the ladder, and we've killed a couple of these enemies. And in Dark Souls, everybody knows that a fog door is an indicator that a boss fight is coming up. So this is our first boss fight, and we walk forward, and we don't see anything. And when we get to about halfway through the bridge, we see a giant bull demon. So this is the first demon that the undead male merchant warned us about. This is the Taurus Demon. And the easiest way to get through the Taurus Demon is to come up to the tower and to do a plunging attack on him, which is why I killed those two soldiers earlier. And as you can see, when I do a plunging attack with the Great Scythe, I take out about half his life. And then what I like to do is I like to use the black fire bombs, which I found and I equipped earlier. And as a matter of fact, you can kill him with nothing but fire bombs. Or if you have a decent weapon, like I do here, you can also just do melee. So I showed you guys how to do a plunging attack and how to melee him a little bit and how to use fire bombs. And you should not have any problems with him if you follow that strategy. Do a plunging attack, throw a bunch of black fire bombs or regular fire bombs at him, and then finish him off with melee or finish him off with range attacks. Okay, so the reason I picked up that key in the previous video, the basement key, is because I needed to open that door. And I am going to bring that dragon over, and he's going to flame the entire bridge, and that's the reason why I took some steps into the bridge. And now we're going to talk to probably the most important NPC in the game, and that is Solaire of Astora, an adherent of the Lord of Sunlight and another covenant giver. He is actually the gatekeeper or the covenant giver for the way of the way of the sun. And he offers to help us. And there is so much lore around Solaire that I'm not going to talk about it in this video. I'm actually going to wait till later on when we get to Honor Wendell and we've seen some of the background information that's going to help us piece together his story. So, but I did want to introduce you to Solaire, and he has some interesting commentary later on. He says that the flow of time is convoluted with heroes facing in and out. The very fabric wavers, relationship and obscure. There is no telling how much longer your world and mine will be in touch with each other. So right off the bat, he's given us a huge hint that he could be a hero or a great hero from another world. That he is just not a normal undead. So that he's special. He's also a warrior of the sun. He tells us to look for his signs so that we can summon him and he can help us on our journey. And he also seems to have some kind of weird obsession with the sun. If only I could be so grossly incandescent. I love that dialogue. If only I could be so grossly incandescent. If only I could shine so unknowingly brightly as the sun. So he has sort of a love-hate relationship with the sun, and he's starting to tell us that. Okay, so normally when you're in this area, you would immediately walk through this bridge. We're going to go up these stairs here. And first of all, we're doing a little bit of rule number 1, but we are going to violate rule number 2 in this video, guys. We're going to be without the fast roll for a bit, and I'll tell you why. But normally you would go straight here instead of going through this door. But the way I like to do it is I'd like to get the basement key, and I'd like to open the door, and I like to open the shortcuts right away. So in the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to open a couple of shortcuts. So the first shortcut we're going to open is one that is going to put us close to the bonfire in the Undead Parish, and that's this one. And the next shortcut that we're going to open is going to lead us back to Firelink Shrine, and that is actually a pretty important one, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And the reason I put on the stone set is to have extra defense, because there are these undead dogs that can do quite a bit of damage. But they're pretty stupid. Sometimes they'll jump into that fire behind me and they'll just burn themselves to death. So there is also another NPC here that appears to be trapped. And I guess he heard us walking about and he wants us to unlock the door. And he's finished. How did this happen? So we are going to use the residence key. And this is another reason why we killed the undead male merchant, is to get the residence key so that we can get into this door. And Griggs of Vinheim, a sorcerer of the school, meaning of the dragon school of magic from Vinheim, thanks us for helping him resume his travels, and he actually tells us that he'll see us back in Firelink Shrine. So I guess we will be able to talk to him a little bit more in a few when we get back to Firelink Shrine. And he also talks about some mysterious, important task at hand. Alright, so there is a corpse sticking out of a barrel, so that's a sure sign that there's some loot there. So I've picked up the sorcerer set and the catalyst. And here's some torch-wielding undead. And I am very, very happy that I had the stone set, because they bum rushed me and they burned me with their torches. So this is one of the reasons that I wore the stone set, that the Lower Undead Burg, it's got tougher enemies than up above. And I wanted to have a little bit of extra physical defense. And actually the stone set has high fire defense as well, so just quite a bit more defense, and I was willing to give up the fast roll to go through this area with much better defensive capabilities. Okay, so these doors have enemies behind them, and you can hit them through the doors. I don't know if you guys knew that. I actually saw that in the video before, and they didn't know you could do it, so I'm passing that hint along. So you can actually take these two guys out. If you don't, when you walk through here, you will trigger an ambush, and this thief, along with the other two back there, will try to ambush you. Alright, so we're continuing to go through this very dangerous neighborhood. This is, if we own real estate in Dark Souls in Lordran, this is not the neighborhood where we'd want to buy, right? This is a pretty dangerous, pretty sketchy neighborhood. So there's a bunch of thieves here. And there's another one over there. So I'm going to top myself off here. Have a full health bar. And I'm going to do the running two-handed strong attack of the Great Scythe. And I really like to do the strong attack, the normal strong attack, just because it has such a huge hitbox. And there's some treasure over there, and that happens to be just a large soul, so not too excited about that, but we continue on our way. And we're going to do a little bit of rule number 1. Rule number 2, which actually we're doing both, rule number 1 and number 2. Rule number 1 is to make sure that we only equip essential equipment, and rule number 2 is to maintain our fast roll. So we did both rule number 1 and number 2 there. And here we've come up on another merchant, and this is the female undead merchant. And she actually tells us that, which is kind of weird, that she likes these parts. There's a lot of hollows here, there's a lot of undead, but she happens to like this area. If you actually explore her dialogue, she will actually let you know that she likes her location because she can pick up moss, which she can sell to you. And she's actually a pretty important merchant as well. She's got a lot of useful items, especially that curse cure. And in the first original version of the game, she did not sell that item. That was actually added in a later patch because there was a huge outcry and players wanted to be able to get rid of curse easier. So they patched the game and they gave her the ability to sell the curse cure. Okay, but enough about that. We've just unlocked the shortcut to Firelink Shrine, and that was the whole reason for getting the basement key and the whole reason for going down that very, very long ladder and walking through that very dangerous neighborhood, is so that we could open up that shortcut. And like I said, this is typically not done in the order that I'm doing it. Typically you would go through that bridge, you would go past the door, you would go, and then you would have to come back after you've obtained the basement key and retrace your steps. But I don't like to do that. And we just passed another fog door, so that we know that there's another boss fight coming up, which we probably will do in the next video. Alright, so we are running through this area that we've cleared of enemies, and there's really not much of lore that we can say here. And as far as I know, this is the longest and the tallest ladder in the game, in Dark Souls. And it takes a long time to go up that ladder. So you guys tell me if I'm wrong. You guys tell me if there's actually a longer ladder in Dark Souls, but I don't think there is. And obviously you don't want to fall down the hole there, because obviously you'll die. Okay, so we're doing a little bit of rule number 1, which is to equip essential equipment only, and a little bit of rule number 2, which is to make sure that we have fast roll. So 25%, that our equipment load is at 25% of our equipment capacity. And there is the second demon that the Undead Merchant warned us about. He mentioned a humongous drake. So yes, that indeed is a humongous drake. It's a pretty big drake. And actually he's pretty tough. And we're going to kick this ladder, so that becomes a shortcut. And now I'm going to show you guys how to get the Drake Sword. And most of you guys probably know about this, but the reason I wanted to get the Drake Sword is because there is a lot of discussion on the community about the Drake Sword. And a large number of people think that the Drake Sword is a crutch for newbies and for early in the game. And they complain that it shouldn't be available so early on, and that it actually keeps you from developing good quote-unquote habits, because it allows you to get through so many enemies so quickly, because basically people are saying that it's an overpowered weapon for when you can get it in the game. And I could not disagree more. And the reason I say that is because you saw me make a +5 great scythe. And if you go back just a few seconds ago, you'll be able to see my my character screen, and you'll be able to see that I'm doing 179 physical damage. The Drake Sword does 108 physical damage flat. There is no scaling. So I'm doing close to 90% of the damage that the Drake Sword can do. And you can actually pick up other weapons that will allow you to do more damage than that. You can actually make fire weapons, or you can make magic weapons way before you can pick up the Drake Sword. So I don't understand why people are complaining about the Drake Sword and why they call it a clutch, or a crutch, or a newbie weapon. I actually think that it's... I disagree with that, and I guess I'd like to hear about your thoughts on it and your comments, and we can have a discussion around it. All right, so enough about the Drake Sword. So let's go up this tower, and I started going up the tower because I had my weapon enchanted, and the Goldpine resin wore out, so I decided to go back to the bonfire and rest. So now that we've, and I'm going to show you, this is an altar, and it looks to be the statue of somebody that's been broken down. And this is actually the spot where Solaire can initiate you into his covenant. But you need to have very high faith in order to be allowed or be invited into his covenant. But that's where you could meet Solaire later in the game, and he can initiate you into his covenant. All right, so we're going to go up the ladder here, and that is because up this ladder there is another Black Knight. Each knight that you encounter in the game is going to have a different weapon. So this Black Knight this Black Knight has the Great Sword. So he has a heavier and longer and slower sword than the Black Knight that we killed earlier. That one had a sword. This one has a Great Sword. And if we're lucky, we'll get the drop. And there it is. We did get the drop. And I'll show you the description. It's essentially the same description as the Black Knight sword, but it's heavier and it has much higher strength requirements than the Black Knight sword. So anyway, the reason I like to take on these Black Knights is because they drop Titanite chunks, and we are going to try to upgrade our weapon to the max to +15 as soon as we can, and Titanite chunks are going to help us do that. Okay, so we are going to continue, and we are going to be going into the new church, what Andre referred to as the new church. And when we were in this area before, I didn't have a weapon, and I was running around like a little girl, if you guys remember. So this time we're going to pick up that halberd, which we couldn't before. And now that we have a weapon, we're going to be manly, even though we're a female character. We are going to be, let's just say, more heroic. Instead of saying manly, we're going to be more heroic. And we're going to stand our ground, and we're going to take on all of these knights. And by the way, these knights are excellent for farming. And that's because they drop all of their equipment. They drop their armor, they drop their weapons, and they drop their shields. And the shield and their weapon are pretty strong. They're pretty good items, especially if you're able to get not the rapier, but the boulder side sword, the side sword that some of these boulder knights use. It's an excellent thrusting sword. Okay, so now let's take on this armor knight. And he's huge, and he's got just a giant mace. But he is not going to be a match for the great scythe. And let's see. Oh, he's given us a great axe. We're getting some great drops in this episode. So the great axe is a pure strength weapon. In a previous video, I mentioned the great club, which I think the great club is still better than the great axe, and that's because the great axe has higher requirements, and it's a little bit. It doesn't have the range. And just in case you guys didn't see him, I want to point out the sorcerer up there with his trident. And we're going to go pay him a visit in the next video. And he's been, we've given him notice. So if he saw us, he knows that we're going to be coming at him in the next video. Okay, so we've made it back to Firelink Shrine. And we are going to be finishing this video out in a couple of minutes here. But first, let's go talk to this depressing guy, the crestfallen warrior. And he lets us know that the nutty sorcerers come back. So he's probably talking about Griggs, since we saved Griggs, and Griggs told us he would meet us back at Firelink Shrine. And there he is. There is Griggs with his Vinheim sorcerer's outfit. And he feels like he owes us something for saving him. And when he says you're clearly talented, that has to do with your intelligence level. You need to have intelligence level of 10 or above in order for him to offer to sell you spells and to teach you magic. He's also telling us a little bit about his master, Big Hat Logan, and he's bummed out because Big Hat just left him standing one day, just left him a note and took off, even though he was his teacher. And Griggs actually went after him, and that's probably how he got himself entrapped in the Lower Undead Burgs. So we look at some of the items that he sells. The bellowing and the lingering Dragon Crest rings are excellent. And if you saw his spells, he sold a combination of spells that have to do with sound alteration, like full control. And he also sold some offensive spells. And I think Logan was the one that taught him the offensive spells, because the original School of Magic only dealt, the Dragon School of Magic in Vinheim only dealt with sound alteration spells, but I believe Logan is the one that came up with the offensive spells. Okay guys, well that is going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and keep sending me your comments and thoughts on it. This is the Tech Phantom signing off. Until the next time.